All right, it's time once again to debunk Tom Steyer, as well as this phony global warming 97% of all scientists claim. And this is part of the reason why Tom Steyer hates Donald Trump so much. This guy is a global warming nut, a climate change clown. How obsessed is he? Well, in 2013, he started an environmental and political action committee called NexGen America, and one of the methods of operation that his group is using are ad hominem attacks on politicians who don't subscribe to their global warming cult. And this article that I found explicitly quotes the chief strategist of NexGen saying that if you don't believe that humans are causing the planet to warm, then you have competency issues. You're incompetent. Remember Liar Steyer's Trump attack ad where he called President Trump mentally unstable? This is what liberals do. They want to silence you and they want to shame you. And by calling you a denier, they're implying that you're on the wrong side of the issue. You know, the debate is over and the science is settled. They assume that the very thing being questioned is already true. So this NexGen group uses another ploy that if you're not part of the climate change cult, then you must be in bed with big oil. The Koch brothers have paid you off. And it's funny because if you want to look for financial bias, then look no further than the scientists who are on the government payroll. $32.5 billion, that billion with a B, $32.5 billion spent on climate studies from 1989 to 2009. And it just keeps growing and growing. You know, grant-seeking scientists can get very rich from a career in global warming. If you just mention global warming in your research proposal, then bingo, you qualify for a lucrative government research grant. Money, money, money. So the next time you hear a climate fanatic talking about big oil influencing opinions, who are they to point fingers? So this NexGen strategist also attacked Rand Paul for having the nerve to question this fake, fraudulent, supposed consensus that 97% of scientists believe that humans are causing the planet to warm. And NexGen also produced a video with this climate change snowflake named Jenny Slate, who really should stick to giving, beauty tips or talking about the Kardashians. You couldn't pick a worse spokeshole than Jenny Slate for promoting Tom Steyer's climate change cult. So she's in this video literally speaking like she's talking to a child. And in a typical liberal fashion, did she go over facts and data? No. All she did was repeat the lie and basically say that it's NASA. NASA says that 97% of scientists believe it. You can't question NASA. What's wrong with you? Nobody questions NASA. Don't you know that the debate is over and the science is settled? Shame on you. Yeah, well, I'm going to do just that. Question NASA. Not just with a bunch of name calling and circular reasoning, but with facts. But first, let's watch a little of Jenny Slate educating us on climate change.
And today we're going to look at some of the truly bonkers things being said by climate change deniers in our government. There are a lot of shenanigans going on with the data. If there's one thing we know about NASA, it's that they really love shenanigans. Those guys love it. I love those shenanigans. Little known fact, NASA actually stands for the National Aeronautics and Shenanigans Administration. Houston, we have some shenanigans. I couldn't help myself. Scientists, like the rest of us humans, can have beliefs, but that doesn't make it science. The difference is that the rest of us humans have beliefs, like pizza is a cool food and old ladies with purple hair have great stories. Scientists have beliefs based on facts and scientific observations, and 97% of the scientists who study climate believe that global climate change is real and caused by humans. That's us. We did it. It's bad.
Okay, first of all, let's go to NASA's website where, sure enough, they make the statement of opinion that essentially it's extremely likely that humans are causing the planet to warm up. But if you scroll down to see who their airtight sources are for coming to this conclusion, they cherry-picked 4 bogus studies. And if you know anything about studies, it's very easy to massage, maneuver, and manipulate them in order to influence the results. And all 4 of these studies used sneaky, fatally flawed methodology. So imagine you're a global warming fanatic like Tom Steyer. How would you go about manufacturing a study that concludes that humans are causing the planet to warm? Well, obviously, you would want to weed out as many of the skeptics as possible. And that's exactly what they did with each and every one of these so-called studies. Some did it by eliminating scientists. Some did it by surveying and eliminating studies, or papers as they're referred to. Other examples, some utilized verbal trickery in the way that they worded their questions, and some used creative search query trickery in order to weed out what they didn't like. So let's start with this one, 97%. So this college student and her professor managed to whittle it down to just, get this, 79 scientists. You have got to be kidding. This is laughable, considering that the Oregon Petition, a real study, surveyed over 31,000 American scientists, including over 9,000 with PhDs. So how did she and her professor manage to eliminate over 31,000 scientists? Well, she conducted a 2-minute online survey of Earth scientists working for, get this, government and universities. How convenient. You know, it was reported by the Washington Times that liberal professors outnumber conservatives by a ratio of 11.5 to 1. So by singling out university professors, you're going to get a group of people who are probably global warming fanatics. What about Earth scientists working for government? I think that's self-explanatory. The government gives lucrative grants to people who are trying to demonstrate that global warming is real and dangerous. So she cherry-picked 2 biased groups of people, and only 5% of these Earth scientists identified themselves as climate scientists. So she omitted, for the most part, the people whose opinions we would value most, such as solar scientists, space scientists, physicists, meteorologists, and astronomers. She also asked all the wrong questions. For example, she asked if human activity was a significant contributing factor to warming. But here's the problem. Scientists will tell you that in their minds, a very small amount is considered significant. So this study is worthless from head to toe. Next, we have this guy, Anderegg, 97 to 98%. And once again, another college student who once again managed to eliminate over 31,000 scientists. He whittled it down to just 50 scientists. Now, the sleight of hand that he used to cherry-pick scientists was to only select what they are calling the most prolific scientists. He assumed that if a scientist had written lots of papers, then their opinion was more important than someone who had just written a few papers or hadn't written any at all. And so you look at this and say, well, yeah, the people who have written multiple papers have probably been given multiple government grants. So of course these people are going to support the hand that feeds them. The other fatal mistake that this college student did was he used Google Scholar to select publications. The problem with Google Scholar is that it includes not just peer-reviewed journals, but also op-ed pieces, opinion pieces. This college student also looked at abstracts because he's not a scientist, but scientists will tell you that abstracts are inaccurate and misleading. So again, this study is also worthless and useless. NASA's next highly regarded source is a global warming activist named John Cook, who runs an activist website and has an activist book. So this guy claims that 97% of articles published from 1991 to 2011 endorse the view that human activity is responsible for some warming. some. So there we go with another vague, ambiguous word. So if you believe that humans have accounted for, 1% of warming over the last 100 years, all of a sudden you might be lumped in with Jenny Slate's claim that humans are causing all of this alleged warming. And this guy also threw out 7,930 papers because they expressed no opinion. Because had he included these papers, that would have reduced his 97% number down to 33.6%. Yet NASA is still citing this flawed study to back up its fake 97% claim. And finally, we get to NASA's fourth highly regarded source, a highly partisan Australian blogger whose opinion editorial was not peer-reviewed. And after she managed to weed out 92% of global warming papers, she concluded that 75% of scientists believe that humans are responsible for most of the observed warming of the last half century. So 75% of 8%. And so how did she cherry pick just 8% of articles? She searched for global climate change instead of climate change. And because she's not a scientist, remember she's just a blogger, scientists say that she misinterpreted many articles. And in fact, a follow-up study aimed at updating her 75% figure found that only 7% of papers support the scientists' agree claim. So we went from 75% down to 7%. And so basically, NASA cited 4 flawed studies, and Tom Steyer and his Hollywood millennial socialite spokesperson Jenny Slate are using NASA's bogus claim to shut down the debate and shame people. And why did they ignore these other studies? One peer-reviewed study found that 1/3 of scientists are alarmist, 1/3 are skeptics, and 1/3 say that they are uncertain. Another peer-reviewed journal found that only 43% agreed that, with the IPCC's claim to be highly confident that more than half of modern warming is due to human activity. And finally, just to keep it all in perspective, what scientists think is not proof. We haven't even gotten into discussing how Al Gore's hockey stick graph was manipulated by magically eliminating the medieval warm period and by attaching thermometer data to reconstructed data in order to warm the last 50 years. And why'd they do that? Because the reconstructed data says that there has been no warming. In other words, the thermometer data, which only goes back to 1880, doesn't match up with the tree ring and sediment data, which goes back thousands of years from present. So something's wrong here. This suggests that either the reconstructed data is inaccurate and or the thermometer data is inaccurate. And if you're saying, well, how can you question the thermometer data? Well, there was a study done to determine the margin of error of thermometer data, and that margin of error is as much as the 0.8 of 1 degree of claimed temperature rise since 1880. And this margin of error doesn't even account for the possibility of urban heat island effect, whereby thermometers are placed near pavement where heat gets trapped, thus causing falsely higher readings. So more and more, it's looking like this global warming stuff is a bunch of hysteria.
Houston, we have some shenanigans.
Yeah.